Learning something about what we all think we know already, and that is how we should diagnose, how we should treat a disease which is an age-old disease, tuberculosis. It has been observed that every individual, every doctor you interview will have his own idea on what should be the best way to diagnose this disease and what is the best way to treat this disease. In fact, different studies which have been done have very clearly shown that there will be more prescriptions than the doctors who are interviewed. So this brings us to something which is the most critical part of this disease management, and that is what should be the standard of care for a patient of tuberculosis. Internationally, there are some guidelines, but yes, for India, we are more specific in the context of our own country. And you will be happy to learn that in India, we have our own standards for TB care. There are standards for diagnosis, there are about 5 standards for treatment, and then we have about 10 standards for public health. And it is for the first time in the world that there are standards for social inclusion also. So as you can see that the government of India, along with the World Health Organization, has brought out this booklet which we call as Standards for TB Care in India. And what I have to talk on is, friends, all part of the information which is given here. I was fortunate to be one of those who helped in providing these standards of TB care for the country. And the whole process started with a national workshop which was held way back in December 2012. And in that workshop, we discussed evidences, because whatever standards we develop should be based on some evidence. And also we wanted to have acceptability of the standards to not only the government system, not only the public sector or the medical colleges, but to the private sector and all other settings across the country. Accordingly, you will find that if we go through the list of experts which contributed to the standards of TB care, there were more than 140 experts, and they belonged to different areas. There were program managers, there were clinicians, there were associations of the different professions like Association of Chest Physicians, Association of Microbiologists, Pediatricians, and above all, the Indian Medical Association also had its representation. Then we had members from expert committees at the national level. We had international people from the World Health Organization, from the International Union, all of whom contributed to what we today call as the standards for TB care in India. Coming to the first part of this book, what should be the standard for diagnosis? It may seem simple. Yes, TB, well, we all know that tuberculosis is diagnosed through sputum examination. But then the issue would be that whom to test for the sputum examination? The guideline says that any person with signs and symptoms of tuberculosis, whether it is cough for more than 2 weeks, hemoptysis, fever, weight loss, such is an individual whom we should start thinking could be suffering from TB and hence do this test. And then in children, we must also include some other factors, because the child may not be very communicative. So for children, it's talked of persistent fever and or cough for more than 2 weeks, loss of weight or no weight gain, and history of contact with an infectious TB case. These patients must be evaluated for tuberculosis. And then there is a group in which we should do regular screening. You see, the first group is the one who is approaching the health facility for some complaints. But the second group, as a matter of routine, may not approach the health facility at all. And this group includes people who are living with HIV, children who are malnourished. Then there are comorbid conditions like diabetes, people who are on routine immunosuppressive drugs, people who are on corticosteroid therapy. Such individuals, as a matter of routine, should be screened and questioned. Do you have the symptom of cough? Are you having any prolonged fever? Would you be having hemoptysis? And we should always then subject this individual to the diagnostic test. And then there is a group wherein we need to see that yes, this is a group which belongs to the vulnerable population. And friends, here I am talking about the elderly, old age homes you will find jails where there is vulnerable population, and then there would be vulnerable population even in hospitals. You may find the healthcare workers who would be intermingling with so many patients suffering from tuberculosis. Some may be on treatment, some without treatment, and they are definitely at a higher risk of developing tuberculosis. Hence, this group of patients, as a matter of routine, should be screened for symptoms of tuberculosis. The diagnostic technology used for the testing: microbiological confirmation on sputum. Yes, we all know that to demonstrate the mycobacteria is probably the surest way to prove that this individual is suffering from tuberculosis. And it has been seen that if we do 2 sputums rather than 1, it's definitely going to increase the diagnostic yield. Hence, the recommendation is that yes, include 1 early morning sputum and 1 spot specimen for subjecting them to microscopy. But here, in addition to microscopy, in the standards of care, we also include molecular tests as the diagnostic tool. In certain situations, the first test which is done for a chest symptomatic is a molecular test, and as we go down, you will understand the reasons why. It is for the first time, I would say, that at the national level, the importance of chest X-ray as a screening tool has been emphasized. Earlier, everyone was focusing on sputum, thinking that yes, we have to cut the chain of transmission, so we have to identify sputum positive TB patients, those who are really infectious. And because of that prioritization, somewhere the smear negative or the chest X-ray positive were being missed. So hence, in the standard of care, it is now stated that chest X-ray has a specific role, and all patients should early be screened for chest X-ray wherever the facility is available. Serological tests have been banned. In fact, the government has banned the manufacture of these reagents, they have banned the import, and they have banned the use of these for diagnostic purposes. However, you see, the interferon gamma release assay, IGRA as popularly known as, it could be used as an adjunct for diagnosis, as a complementary test for diagnosis in children. And of course, studies have shown that tuberculin skin test is also as effective in terms of understanding whether the individual has got infection from tuberculosis. Both these tests in no way tell disease in their own sense, but only indicate infection. And if an individual is a recent converter, then obviously there is greater probability that this individual may break down into disease. Hence, both these tests are really, I would say, adjunctive tests in the diagnosis of the disease. As a standard of care, because remember, these guidelines are not only for public sector, not only for the private sector, but also for national program managers. So, it is mandatory that whenever newer diagnostic tools have to come, there should be a system to evaluate these diagnostic tools. So, under standard 2.5, validation of newer diagnostic tests has also become a standard of care. For extrapulmonary tuberculosis, of course, it all depends upon the site of involvement, and wherever possible, an appropriate specimen needs to be taken and to be subjected to, again, microscopy, culture, which could be liquid or solid culture, molecular tests, that is the cartridge based nucleic acid amplification test, what we popularly call as the CBNAT test, or the line probe assay, and of course, histopathological examination wherever possible. Diagnosis of HIV co-infected TB and drug resistant TB. All TB patients, friends, as per standard of care 4.1, all diagnosed TB patients should be offered HIV counseling and testing. In India, it is seen that roughly about 5% of the TB patients are actually having HIV positivity. Hence, it can be presumed that TB patients are at a greater risk of getting infection, because by and large in society, amongst the common population, this would be less than 1%. So, if in TB patients we are getting 5% HIV positivity, that is an issue, and hence we have this particular recommendation. Then there are certain groups of patients whom we must subject to testing for drug resistance. And who are this group? Well, this is a group who has failed on the first line treatment. They are patients, children who are actually not responding on the treatment. The doctor is prescribing the required medication, patient is taking the medication as per the doctor's prescription, but the condition is deteriorating. Then there are contacts of MDR-TB patients. Then any individual who during the course of treatment continues to be sputum positive. Well, is there drug resistant in this patient? It always reads a question mark, because normally we would expect that if an individual has taken anti-TB treatment for 2 to 3 months, this sputum would become negative. So, if on the other hand this individual continues to be positive, we must keep in mind that could there be drug resistance. If a person has had prior history of anti-TB treatment, there is a possibility that yes, this attack of TB may give him greater chance of having drug resistant organisms. TB with HIV co-infection and all presumptive TB cases amongst the people living with HIV should also be subjected to drug resistant testing. The reason for this is that actually speaking, we have to identify the problem of resistance in this group very early. Otherwise, we may continue to give them the first line treatment, and the patient who is resistant will very soon succumb to his disease. So, to reduce mortality in HIV TB, it is important that for this particular group we do the resistance profiling much early. And what all tests do we do for? Well, amongst the first line drugs, at least we should test for rifampicin, and amongst the second line drugs, we should make an attempt to test for ofloxacin and kanamycin. These tests should be done upfront, and the preferred option, as is obvious from the slide, is that we should go for a molecular test. By molecular test, I have already defined, these are tests which are genetically based, cartridge based nucleic acid amplification test will give you a result within 2 to 3 hours, or if we do a line probe assay, you will have the result within 2 to 3 days. So, this will give us a very early evidence that patient is having drug resistance. However, we may not get the same answer in all situations. We may not have the same facility everywhere in the country. and hence we need to also recommend that wherever this is not possible, go for the culture technique of drug susceptibility testing, liquid culture or solid culture, whatever is available. I am happy to share with you at this moment that under the national program, the revised National TB Control Program, today the entire country is having facility for doing molecular testing. In fact, over 600 machines, one in each district, has been provided by the government for doing this, and soon this will gear up to close to about 1,000 machines. So you can understand the emphasis of early diagnosis which the government is giving, and rightly so, because the sooner you diagnose resistance, the sooner you will put them on appropriate treatment. The ultimate objective is to offer DST to all diagnosed TB patients. You know, we as doctors know it very well that whenever we develop any other type of infection, say if it is urinary tract infection, we always base our treatment options on the culture and DST. If we have pneumonias, we always try to do sputum for culture and DST. And in the same way, we are also hoping that for tuberculosis, each and every patient will first get a culture and DST available, and then the treatment could be decided based on the drug susceptibility testing. That is the vision, friends. That is the standard of care. But then we have still some way to go to achieve and reach this standard of care. A terminology extensively drug resistant TB. You all know that if in addition to rifampicin and isoniazid, we have resistance to any of the quinolones like the ofloxacin or levofloxacin or moxifloxacin, and we also have resistance to any of the second line injectables like amikacin, kanamycin or capreomycin, then the individual is labeled as having XDR TB or extensively drug resistant TB. And on detection of rifampicin resistant in any patient, it is mandatory that the individual should be offered a DST profiling for second line drugs to identify XDR TB. Because if we treat an XDR TB patient with the drug regimen for MDR TB, obviously we are not doing the standard of care. The outcomes for this patient will be bad. The patient may either die or default from treatment because he is not getting the relief. The standard 5 deals with something which probably again we as doctors face in certain situations: probable tuberculosis. Here is a patient who has all the clinical signs, symptoms of the disease, but in spite of our repeated sputum testing, we are not able to confirm that the patient is a TB patient. The standard of care defines that, okay, this individual could be treated as a case of pulmonary tuberculosis. We label this patient as presumptive TB patient and put the patient on the appropriate treatment based on clinical evidence. And of course, we make an attempt if we can do culture for this group, so that if we can grow organisms for in any possible way, that would help. TB in children is again a major issue when we come to diagnosis, because children have a very varied presentation. As I have already stated, that in all children with presumptive intrathoracic TB, microbiological confirmation should be sought, even though they don't bring out sputum in most of the cases, but effort has to be made to get the sputum or the gastric lavage or the gastric aspirate, and then subject that to the examination with an RNTCP approved diagnostic test like smear microscopy, rapid molecular test or culture. In fact, for this particular group of suspected TB patients, presumptive TB patients, the recommendation is that the preferred option should be a molecular test, because the molecular test is able to pick up the organism even when their concentration is as low as about 130 bacilli per ml of sputum, as compared to a conventional Zeal-Nielsen staining in smear microscopy, which will pick up a bacilli only if there are about 100,000 bacilli per ml of sputum. Just as for adults, we also have a definition of probable pediatric TB patients, wherein we may not get the microbiological confirmation of the disease, but yes, there are radiological signs, there is a history of an contact with an infectious case, there is evidence of TB infection and clinical findings which may suggest tuberculosis. So, based on this, we could start the treatment for this patient. For children with presumptive extrapulmonary TB, appropriate specimen should be taken just like in adults and subjected to the smear examination or to the culture or to the other molecular tests for diagnosis. Now, let us come to what should be the standard for treatment. Well, I think we are all familiar with the first line anti-TB drugs, rifampicin, isoniazid, ethambutol and pyrazinamide. And as far as the injectable is concerned, we use streptomycin. The recommendation is that if a person has never received TB treatment before or has received TB treatment for less than 1 month, then we put this patient as a new TB patient and we give 4 drugs for 2 months. That means isoniazid, rifampicin, pyrazinamide and ethambutol for 2 months. We do not use the injectable here. We reserve the injectable for certain other situations, which we call as category 2 treatment, which we call as patient who may have already received treatment earlier and is a retreatment case. So, for the new patients, we will give these 4 drugs for 2 months, and in the continuation phase, please pay attention, in the continuation phase it is 3 drugs, rifampicin, isoniazid and ethambutol. Not as earlier stated that there will be only 2 drugs. So, this is a remarkable change, as you will see that it is given in red here. So, this is the change which is there in the standard of TB care. One may say, well, the national program is not really adopting it. Well, friends, the national program is trying to adopt the standards of TB care. Whatever you are seeing here, 100% of this is not being done at the country level under the RNTCP, for the simple reason that when we have to talk of national programs, when we have to talk of a wider population coverage, we have to see operational feasibility of that intervention. But definitely, country understands and the country is moving in the direction of the standard of TB care. So, soon somewhere down the line, we will have a treatment regimen with 3 drugs in the continuation phase rather than 2 drugs which we have at present under the program. And the logic is very simple of having 3 drugs, because it has been observed now that the background resistance to isoniazid is very high. It is close to about 20% in those in different studies. And with that scenario in mind, if we give just 2 drugs, it amounts to giving only 1 drug in a large number of patients. Continuation phase is for a period of 4 months, but there is a provision under the standards of care that if the person the patient is having certain types of extrapulmonary TB like bone and joint TB, spinal TB, neurological involvement, then we could extend this continuation phase by 3 to 6 months. So, the total treatment duration, friends, could be anywhere from 12 to 15 months in this group of patients. Dosages, yes, earlier we were using only standard doses as recommended under the program, but now in the standard of care you will find that there are 4 weight bands for the adults. For the children, it's entirely different. For the children, per kg body weight, there are in fact 6 weight bands. But for the adults also, we have an option of giving different drug doses for different weight bands. The one band is from 26 to 33 kg, then from 33 to 50, as you can see, from 51 to 70 and more than 70 kg. Though most of the patients are actually going to fall between 33 to 50, but yes, you may get patients who are even weighing 70 kg plus. Whenever we are using fixed drug combinations, we must ensure that the drugs are bioavailable. That means this brings about quality assurance for drug manufacturers. And this also brings in mind that yes, if in the private sector I am prescribing this drug, I should also prescribe that this should be from a company which is manufacturing good quality drugs. If it is from the national program, then the program has to ensure that this supplier is giving us quality drugs. But without quality drugs, friends, no matter which regimen we use, we will not be successful in treating and curing the patient. Earlier, as far as drug frequency is concerned, treatments have been given 3 times a week. That is what has been recommended under the national program, and that is which is currently also being followed throughout the country. But now we are wiser and we know that yes, the recommendation should be a daily regimen, and that daily regimen should be given under direct observation. National program selected an intermittent regimen because of operational feasibility and kept in mind that if all the drugs are given as recommended, this intermittent regimen will be as effective, which is a fact. But then when we translate that into reality in the field, we find that patients may not be taking all the drugs. Patients may be interrupting the treatment on certain specific days, and that makes the regimen a bit weaker if we have an intermittent schedule of treatment. Hence, the guideline says yes, wherever possible, standard of care is daily intake of anti-TB drugs. And in any case, all patients who are suffering from HIV should be given a daily anti-TB treatment. This is now currently being followed in the RNTCP also. FDCs are the preferred option, though provision is that you could use blister combi packs, like certain of the companies are bringing out their own 4 drugs in one blister combi pack. Even the national program is using a blister combi pack. But recommendation is use fixed drug combinations, because that prevents the misuse of drugs in a way. Patient may take one drug, may not take the other drug. But in an FDC, we are sure that if he has taken the drug, he has taken all the 4 drugs as far as the treatment is concerned. For those individuals who have been previously treated, that means received treatment for more than 1 month earlier, we need a different regimen, because there is a possibility of resistance. Hence, friends, the first thing to be done is that we have to rule out resistance. So, in this group, we must subject them to the test to rule out resistance, and that, as I have already stated, is the molecular test, the Gene Expert or the line probe assay, which will rule out rifampicin resistance or rifampicin and isoniazid resistance. And once they are ruled out, then we give them a regimen which comprises of 5 drugs in the initial intensive phase, and here we may take the help of streptomycin also. Streptomycin given in addition to the 4 drugs for the first 2 months, and then for another month give the rest of the 4 drugs. This makes a 3 month of the intensive phase, and in the continuation phase we extend the continuation phase by 1 month. If you remember, for a new patient we were giving the continuation phase for 4 months, here we give it for 5 months. How to monitor the patient who is on treatment? That is what the standard 8 deals with. And the recommendation as per the standard is that yes, follow up with sputum microscopy. If the person was sputum positive, he should convert over a period of time. If the person was sputum negative, he should remain sputum negative. So, response to therapy should be by sputum microscopy. And definitely, of course, we do clinical improvement of the patient as we as doctors seeing the patient. And when all to do this? The sputum examination should be done at the end of the intensive phase of treatment. That means if the person is on category 1 treatment for a new patient, you will do it at the end of 2 months. And if the patient is on category 2 treatment, which is for the previously treated patients, we would do it at the end of 3 months. And of course, before we stop the treatment, at the end of the treatment, we should also do the sputum examination to say, yes, you do not have any bacteria in your sputum today and you are cured of the disease. In the program, the national program, there was a recommendation that if at any point of time during the course we find the person is sputum positive at the end of intensive phase, we used to extend the intensive phase by another month. Friends, it has been proven that extension of this is no longer necessary. However, at this stage, what we are doing is we are subjecting that individual to DST profiling for identifying resistance. If the organisms are still sensitive to the drugs, then with the continuation phase, the individual will respond and get cured. And however, if we find that the organism at the end of the intensive phase is resistant, we have to change the regimen. We have to switch the individual to a different regimen, which is for the drug resistant TB patients. We need to offer DST in the follow up, as I said, for all those patients who turn out to be positive, and the choice is of a molecular DST because that gives us early results. For extrapulmonary TB, we primarily rely on our clinical judgment and take the help of radiology, as is the situation for response to treatment in children. And what do we do after the treatment is completed? Do we need to follow up? Yes, friends, it is for the first time now that the country has thought of a situation wherein patient has got cured, patient is off your treatment for TB, but does have some sequelae. So, you are thinking in terms, well, somewhere down the line, is there a chance of a relapse? Is there a chance of greater morbidity? So, you have a system that at the end of 6 months and at the end of 12 months, you need to follow up with this patient to rule out TB again. The reason for this is that most of the patients who have to land up with a relapse would do so within the first 1 year of treatment. Treatment of resistant TB, well, by and large, resistant TB should be treated only after it has been diagnosed microbiologically to be resistant. However, there would be some situations, especially in extrapulmonary TB and especially in children, wherein you may not have microbiological confirmation of resistance. And in these exceptional situations, mind you, I am saying exceptional because this should not be the usual practice. In these situations, we may need to consider MDR TB treatment even in the absence of microbiological confirmation. There are questions whether we need to hospitalize the patient, and if so, for how long. Well friends, the standard of care in point 9.2 states that the model of care should be ambulatory. That means no hospitalization as such is required. However, if there are adverse drug reactions, if the patient needs some level of hospitalization, if the patient is a frequent defaulter, you may need to admit the individual to give him proper counseling or to take care of his adverse drug reactions. But by and large, the treatment should be ambulatory at his place of residence. What are the regimens? Well, the basic concept here is that at least 4 second line drugs should be given to which the organisms are susceptible, or these drugs have not been used earlier. And these drugs would include pyrazinamide, it could include a fluoroquinolone. Amongst the fluoroquinolone, the most frequently used is levofloxacin. Any of the injectables, kanamycin or amikacin, preferably in the country we are using kanamycin because it is cheap, it's easily available, and it's as effective as amikacin. And then we are using ethionamide and cycloserine or PAS. So these are the regimens which are used for drug resistant TB management. Well, what about that group of patient which is showing resistance to a quinolone and or resistant to an injectable, which is kanamycin? In this, if we are able to diagnose this resistance early, by early I mean that at the outset of MDR TB treatment, when you subject the sputum to DST for these second line drugs, if we are able to diagnose these early, then we just have to replace these drugs in the treatment regimen. So instead of ofloxacin, we could add moxifloxacin if there is resistance, and instead of kanamycin, we could add amikacin or capreomycin if it is resistant. The rest of the regimen could continue to be the same. Surgery in drug resistance TB. Again, I would say that it is for the first time that the role of surgery has been emphasized in the treatment of TB. Usually, you see surgeons who are doing thoracic surgery for sequelae of TB, for complications of tuberculosis. But today, as a standard of care for drug resistant TB, every patient should be evaluated for surgery at the initiation of treatment or during the follow-up. The current treatment recommendation is to be given for a period of 24 months with an initial intensive phase of 6 to 9 months. But as I have already told you that you see this particular guideline or this particular standard of care is really an evolving document. Somewhere down the line, we will find that there would be a possibility where this treatment duration could be shorter. But as on date, this treatment duration is recommended for 24 months. And here again, under standard 9.7, it is recommended as a standard of care that consultation with a provider experienced in the treatment of patients with drug resistant TB should be obtained whenever possible. So again, for the first time, it has come up that the role of a chest specialist or a role of a specialist who has dealt with drug resistant TB should be consulted. Otherwise, you see, it was always, it's a public health program to be treated in the periphery by a PHC doctor, a basic MBBS doctor, some treatment was even being given by pharmacists and so on. But for drug resistant TB, it has been specifically stated as a standard of care that wherever possible, they should consult a specialist. Patient support systems to ensure that patient is adhering to treatment are of paramount importance. No matter what treatment regimen we use, until and unless we ensure the patient takes the drugs, it will not have its impact. So, there are different strategies which have to be adopted to ensure the adherence. Follow up of the MDR TB or XDR TB patients for sputum examination. Yes, just as in drug sensitive TB, we are monitoring the treatment or response to treatment through sputum examination. A patient who is put on treatment for drug resistant TB, do we really need to do the DST again? Or the first time DST done at 0 months when we put the patient on the treatment is sufficient? That is a question which normally will come to an individual's mind. The recommendation 9.10 deals with this and states that if the individual patient fails to respond or fails to convert by the 6th month of treatment, in that situation, we definitely need to subject the latest culture which you have available with you to second line DST. That may help you to identify the group who is suffering from XDR TB and may require a switch to a different regimen. And that particular regimen of patients with XDR TB is such in which we have more number of drugs and different injectables and different quinolones. Some of the group 5 drugs have also been used for this particular regimen. As you all know that now the grouping of the drug resistant TB drugs have really changed, and now we have put into class A, B, C, D rather than group 1 to 5, and that of course the drugs rearranged in different classes, but essential thing is that for XDR TB we need to give stronger drugs for a longer time. Intensive phase could be increased from 6 months to even 12 months, and therefore the total treatment duration could go from 2 years to even 3 years if required. As a national policy, there should be a possibility of in fact scientifically evaluating any other new drug which comes. Friends, you are I think aware that there are 2 other drugs, bedaquiline and delamanid, which are now being used in the world, and of this bedaquiline is a drug which has come in India for use in a limited way for drug resistant TB management. But that decision has to be taken by a national body. So, that system has to first be in place, and as a standard of care the government has evolved that particular system, so that whenever any new drug is going to come, we are going to have a guideline on how to use the drug effectively, so that we do not lose the drug in future. Patients who are suffering from TB and HIV, well, the treatment would be the same as for those who are not having HIV. Same regimen, same duration, except that the drugs are mandatorily given as daily treatment regimen. And in addition, of course, we would like to give cotrimoxazole prophylactic treatment to all such patients, and all such patients would also receive an antiretroviral treatment, irrespective of the CD4 counts. So, moment a patient has TB and HIV co-infection, automatically it means that this individual will be requiring both the anti-TB drugs and the antiretroviral treatment. The drugs to be started as soon as possible. Isoniazid preventive therapy in this group of patients would be given only after ruling out active tuberculosis. You see, for all HIV patients, there is a symptom screening method to rule out tuberculosis. And once you have ruled out tuberculosis, then this group suffering from HIV would really be requiring prophylactic treatment with isoniazid, which is the standard prophylaxis given for a period of 6 months. Treatment adherence should be a patient-centered approach. We must look into the needs of the patient. We must respect the patient as a beneficiary of your treatment, and not just keep on insisting on the patients coming to your health facility all the time. We need to have a trained treatment supporter. We may also take the help of information communication technology to promote adherence. And this leads us to the standards for public health for tuberculosis. In fact, all practitioners, and that includes all of you, whether you go to the private sector or whether you land up in a government dispensary, all of you are required to have an appropriate regimen as defined under the standards of care, and to ensure that the patient takes the medicine. Also, you are required to maintain a minimum record for that individual patient to ensure that you have successfully treated the patient till the patient has become cured. What about the family members of this patient? Do they require any intervention? Yes, standard 14 deals with contact investigation. So, contact tracing for all household and close contacts of TB patients are screened for TB, as I have already defined under the diagnostic standards. And if you find a child suffering from tuberculosis, we do reverse contact tracing for search of any active TB case in the household of that particular child. And then there are other standards which deal with airborne infection control, whether they are in health facilities or otherwise. Every TB patient needs to be notified under standard 17. In fact, there is now a legislation which says TB is a notifiable disease. Quality assurance systems should be in place. And again, for the first time, you see, the public representatives through the Panchayati Raj systems are being involved for TB care in India. And that is coming as a standard of care 19. Health education has always been a priority. It is similarly reflected here under standard 20. And death audit amongst TB patients. You see, this is something which is new. Any TB patient who is dying needs to be audited. What was the cause of death? Could it have been prevented? Was it delay in diagnosis? Was it faulty treatment? All that will come under standard 21. And if we as doctors and professionals do not adhere to this, then automatically we are not providing standard of TB care to the patient. Standards for social inclusion would actually include information on TB prevention and care seeking, free and quality service, confidentiality and sensitivity of the patient to be maintained, care and support through social welfare programs, and addressing the counseling and other needs of the patient. So, I think you will understand, it is not only diagnosing a TB patient properly, it is not only treating a TB patient properly. It is providing the TB patient with the entire package for the management, which will ultimately lead to TB control and maybe TB elimination at some point of time. Thank you, friends. We can end this TB epidemic provided all of us follow the standard of TB care in India. Thank you.